what I am, because we're all made up and built up of what we've done in our lives. The second thing is a brief history on Te Kōpua. The whole place used to be Te Kōpua 1 before it was taken. And the third thing is a solution to the problem. And the fourth thing is what we're about to do. It's not if we're going to do it, we're going to do it. So the first thing is, some of you know me as Pablo. My name is Reginald Martin Douglas Rickard. It's a bit of a mouthful. My grandmother named me Tau Whakanui. I went to school with Dennis. Went to the Raglan school down near the Arts, which is now the old school down the bottom. So I was born in 1947. Went to school here, left 1964, sent down south to let life be my teacher, is what my mother said. I was brought back in 1987 when she got the land back to help her with this whenua. I've been on the whenua ever since. I'm the oldest person left on this whenua. I've been living on it for the last 30 years since I came back. So it's my job as the oldest person on here to deal with this problem. In 87, when I came back, I worked 1 year here tutoring. Then I brought the Raglan fruit supply. It was the only fruit shop in town that fed the whole town. So I had that as a business. At the same time, Colin Chung started up his restaurant. The Raglan holiday park or the Raglan camp was $200,000 in debt. So we were shoulder tapped as business people to form a committee to try and help to get the camping ground out of debt. So we're shoulder tapped by then the mayor, Angus McDonald, and there's myself, Colin Chung, Wayne Morris, and Brosnan. He was the chairman of the community board. So we set up the terms of reference, and we had to have one person from council on the board and the chairman of the community board. That way we didn't have to report back to either organisation. So we built that up. I've been on there for the last 20 years. I stepped down in 2018, somewhere around there. So when we left there, that camp had $1 million and a kitty on the side for projects to be done for the Papahuia block. And it was set up to bring people into this town, to leave money in this town for the businesses. That was the object of the Papahuia block. The money in it had to go back into it. So while we work, we have to be very careful of the rules and regulations and the gifting of that land for the purpose it was given. And one of the rules on it, that it could not have any financial gain. So the whole camp had to work its system so that the money went back into the Papahuia block and didn't leave that land. And there's supposed to be no financial gain on that land, which meant the government or the people who had it and running it could not take money out and use it for other things. So while I was on that board, I was making sure that that didn't happen. And we achieved that up until the point I left. The other thing, what I got involved with was in 87, I coached Raglan rugby. There was no gym here, so we did a deal with the council on the Raglan Town Hall. The Raglan Town Hall was condemned. The stage had been collapsing. The only people that were in there were birds crapping all over the place. So we formed the trust, did a deal with the council, got working bees, raised money, set up a trust, and propped all the floor underneath the stage that was collapsing and refurbished that town hall up to what it is today. I stepped down from it about 2 years ago. Okay. So the meetings that you guys are having now used to be down at the fire station. So that's my involvement in this town. The last project I'm on is the Raglan Club was going to receivership. I was shoulder tapped to go in there on the executive to pull it around, which we have done, because that's the only place where the old people can go.
Mm.
Since then, I've been just back here on the land, working on our land at Te Kōpua. So that's what I've been doing in the community over the years. 1994, I learned to fly out of Raglan and ended up and got a job with working for Super Air. I retired from the Super Air 2 years ago, so I've been in aviation business since 94. So moving on from that, the history of the Eurodrome going back to when it was taken in 1936 was when it first started being looked at as like an airstrip. They worked on it until 1940. In 1941, it was taken under the Public Works Act under Section 252 as a war, under the War Act, to be used for war purposes. My mother was born in 1923. In 1940, she was only 17 years old when she was watching her place get pushed down and moved out. They had 3 days to get off the land and find accommodation.
Mm.
Her brother, who was 18 years old, went to war, and he came back home, had no home.
Mm.
I was born after the Second World War in 47, and I grew up with the aftermath of one, the Depression. The other thing is the aftermath of the Second World War. People up here lived in poverty.
Mm.
There was no food. They had corrugated iron houses. And I'm not talking about this from history. I was living amongst it.
Mm.
Our job was to do gardens, plant food, ride our horses around the coast and get muscle and that and feed the people. So I was brought up in that era of the hardships that what happened to this whenua did to the people on this land.
Yeah.
It was quite hard. So I'm emotionally attached to it, not just done some research on the place.
Mm.
So this is what I felt and what I saw. The old people, it was really hard living. They had corrugated iron houses with dirt floors. And there's sometimes, with the Carr family, there's quite a few of them sleeping on the floor. And that's what happened back in those days. Also, I'd like to point out that all of us here are victims of our own history. The challenges for this generation is to try and rectify the mistakes were done before. And that's basically what I'm here for.
Mm.
To try and rectify what has been done before. And those are some of the things that have been done for the people on this whenua. It's no longer, it's not being used as an airport. It's a joke with our guys in the aviation business. A lot of them don't pay landing fees. And when you look at it, the first part of that land is Papahuia, and that land was given as a playground for both Māori and Pākehā for all times, with no financial gain. Not as an aerodrome, but planes are landing there, and a lot of them aren't even paying landing fees. They're just using the place. So when you look at that airstrip, what is the benefit of that airstrip for the people in this in Whangaroa? There's no benefit at all whatsoever. But there's a lot of wrongs that have been done on that whenua. One, the gifted part is not being used for what is gifted. The other half that was taken for what it was supposed to be used for is not being used for that.
Mm-hmm.
So why is that? Why is it there? I just heard one of you spoken talking about the flooding of the soccer grounds. When I was on the board of management of the camping ground, we spent thousands of dollars pumping out those soccer grounds for the kids. If the top end of the where we park the aeroplane, Super Air's aeroplane, never floods. If you took back your land that you're supposed to be for the playground for both Māori and Pākehā and put your soccer grounds there, you solve all the problems.
Yeah.
The money that you're collecting off that aerodrome, the Papahuia side of it and our side of it, it's been leased out. And one of the conditions with Papahuia is that you should be making any financial gain. You've had car rallies on there, it's leased out for sound splash. You're collecting money off there like no one's business. You're actually breaking the contract that the land was given for, just on that part. On our part, it's not being used for what it should be used for. In 1969, they subdivided it because they said the other half was no longer needed for an airstrip. They subdivided and put it into a golf course, and that was the big mistake. And it took 11 years of battling with three elections of government to get the land back. So it should have been given back in 69, but it didn't. It was subdivided and carried on for years. Then it was challenged in the 70s, and in 1987, it was eventually given back after 11 years of hardship. And even the historians and the people who've written up said it was a big joke. And even today, they refuse to actually acknowledge the fact that they should be given the other half of the land back. So the solution to the whole problem is put the land back to what it was given for, and you'll solve all the problems. The Papahuia block, when I was on the board, I made sure to get it surveyed out. Two reasons for that is while I was on the board needed to know where their boundaries, what they're administrating. It took 2 years to do that because they wouldn't do it. They said, you're managing a camp. They said, well, where's the camp in this block? So it was agreed, it was about the last year I was there, it was agreed to be surveyed out. I think Bob was on the committee then. He was the chairman of the community board. So it was surveyed out so that the Board of Management knew where their camp was in the Papahuia block. Now, as far as health and safety goes, there's a $9,000 litre jet fuel tank sitting on a fence line to your camping ground, and it's in a reserve. So the question was, if something happened, if that blew up, who was taking responsibility for it? Was it the Board of Management of the camp? Or was it the council head of the managers? Or was it Super Air? Super Air went through the whole process of putting it there, which was legal. I was 6 years on the Health and Safety Committee on Super Air. So you have a bomb sitting in there that nobody's doing anything about. You have an airfield that's not being used for an airfield. You have a part of Papahuia block that was gifted that you're collecting money off it. So the solution to the problem is go through a process and putting the land back to what it was originally given for, especially Papahuia. If that land goes back to Papahuia, the rest of it's no use to anybody. It has to go back to us anyway. But if it doesn't go back to us, we're going to take it back because it's been 75 years after the Second World War when it should have come back. It's been over 80 years since they took it. We're going into climb up to the next 100-year mark, and that's been history with Māori land, and it's got to stop. And like I said, it's history we're dealing with. We need to fix it.
Excuse me, Pablo.
What I'm asking you guys to do is to move a motion that the airport be closed, because if you don't, we will close it. I'd like to point out another point. The person who works in civil aviation is my mate who worked with Super Air. It's easy to close that airstrip. You don't need much to close it. You guys close it all the time for functions. And it should be used for the purpose the land was given for, and the rest should be given back. Okay, the last thing I want to close off with is what we're going to do if we don't get satisfaction with it. It was in our letter that the trust sent to the board and to Gavin. We will actually go through a process and give them back. We will fence our boundaries. We will take our land back. The people we have behind us is the media. My daughter works for Media Works. Vivian Rickard is the Commissioner of Police. He retired 2 years ago. He's now working for Working Income, I think it is. Everything to do with the police and that, we have it sorted. We were going to go through a process and take it. I don't want to do that, but we will do it. I'd like to see it go through a process to be sorted out from that end, but we need to get something back by next Tuesday when we have our next meeting. That is going to go through the process. And the easiest way to start the process is for you to move a motion that land goes back to the original owners. And the purpose it was given for, especially Papahui, the purpose it was given for wasn't for an airstrip. And it wasn't meant to be collecting revenue off. That's breaking one of the terms. They can take the whole camp and all Papahui back because you've broken those regulations on using that airfield for income.
Yeah.
And it can't be denied because it's in it'll be in your financials. So with that, I hope we can move forward with this because I've got a lot of people that are sitting around that we're having an AGM in November, end of November, first week in December, and it will be discussed then. But if we have to take it back, it's going to cause a lot of turmoil in this town. Some will be for it, some will be against it. And I'm not a believer in negative or positive. I'm a believer in what is. What's negative to you could be positive to me, and it could be vice versa. So I'm dealing with this problem, dealing with what is. It's land that's no longer being used for the purpose it was given, so it should be put back for the purpose that it was given for.
Kia ora, Pablo. Thank you very much for being here and for sharing your kōrero with us. Really appreciate you taking the time to do that and letting us know just a little of where you stand and you know, where the hapu is sitting. It's really important for us as a board to know that, and I know there's a lot that we don't know, and there's a lot that we need to learn. And myself, you know, we as a board, I think we'll discuss this when we talk about it in our in the works and issues report, which is where we've got our airfield agenda item. We will have a conversation about what we as a board want to do from here in response to you speaking. I don't know whether, whilst you're here, whether Rob, I mean, I know, and I know that you know this as well, I know that, and hardly need to point out the fact, but we as a board understand that there is the current issue of the council wanting to sort out safety issues on the airfield, which is a very small matter in comparison to what you're raising. We also know as a board that the council in March came to us and suggested that they are going to start looking into investigating their management and, in a sense, what they would say ownership or management and oversight of the airfield space. So I think, and we totally supported that as a board, that the council, yes, please get on with that. So as a board, we're sitting here understanding there's two things happening at the same time, and I feel like I understand where you're sitting with this. I think I don't know whether I could offer for the board to ask any specific questions. I'm a little aware of our time, and I'm also aware that Rob, Ashley, and Roger are both here from council, and whether either of you would want to respond to Pablo at this point. Maybe I think Rob and Roger, I imagine you'll be staying on when we have the airfield discussion as well, which is really about what we as a board will then decide to do. But would you like to respond, Rob or Roger, to Pablo at this point?
I think Chris is putting his hand up.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair, could I ask that Pablo be given speaking rights during our discussion on the airfield so that we can ask him questions when detailed stuff comes up further in our meeting? Are you able to stay on the call, Pablo?
I think, thanks for that thought, Chris. Obviously, it's really important that there's, that we go about, as a board, it's really important that we go about this in the right way,
We've done that for other people, for other issues.
That's fine with me. I'd just like to point out two other things. One is Gavin has already rung me and I've had a word spoken to him. The second thing, you can close that airport down tomorrow and solve all your problems with safety. You don't have to go through all this other rigmarole to actually sort it. You can close it. I can close it. I can ring them up tomorrow and do it. And I can give them the facts of what's going to happen to that airport. And the first thing to pilots is they have to send a NOTAM out to all pilots for their safety. They will not fly in here.
Yep.
Now, I think whether you do it, I can do it. I'm giving you the opportunity to fix this before we take steps in fixing it ourselves. So we've been pushed around for quite a long time with these regulations and rules and these processes and procedures for the last 75 years. Now, you must understand that. We're not going through it any longer. Okay, and I said this to Gavin. So I'm going through a process of the community board, then the council, and up to the government, wherever it's going to go. But by the time it gets to government, it's going to be pretty rough for a lot of people in this town, emotionally. Now, the thing is, I can handle a lot of emotions. I've trained in martial arts most of my life. I'm a fifth dan martial artist. We train about emotions. I can handle this stuff because I'm dealing with nothing that benefits me. I'm trying to fix a wrong.
I appreciate that, Pablo. Yeah.
So you need to understand, you can have your meetings about, I don't need to be included in your safety of your people walking across land that was gifted to them for an aeroplane that you don't even know who's flying and that shouldn't even be flying anyway. The safety on those planes as well is if any one of them stalls, the path that it goes over is the 4 square shop. The other part is down here over our Marais. The other thing with it, we're over tow planes at Christmas every 5 minutes, full throttle, towing planes over us when we're trying to have meetings.
Yeah.
You need to really understand that and not butter it over. Like, we understand the process. We're going over those processes. The last process we had with our road was 4 years ago, went through the council process with the mayor. We still haven't come to a conclusion, even though it was promised to be given back. We're not going through that process. We're going to take that land. You've got to understand it.
I hear what you're saying, Pablo.
The opportunity, but I must say this to all the other members on this board and other people that are representative of council listening. We're going to take it if you do not go through the process and start working positively about giving that land back to what it's originally used for. And the part that's not being used to give back. You need to do that because we're not going to be butted over.
Yeah, I got that, Pablo. I think, and I think that, you know, if I feel that we need to, I know that we can speak to you again. It's not like this is our only opportunity, right? So if, I'm pretty sure that you'd be open. If the board have questions or want to know more information, that you would be open to sharing that with us. So yeah, I think what we'll do in response, thank you, Pablo, really appreciate that. And Chris, in response to what you were asking, I don't think this is the place to do that today. I think that we as a board need to decide what we need to do.
May I ask Pablo a question then, if he's not going to be able to ask questions of later on in the meeting?
I'm just aware of the time. I'm also aware that maybe Roger or Rob may want to respond. So Chris, is it something you feel that we can ask Pablo like outside of the meeting? You know that I
would like to get this on the record. It's very simple. It's just, if the airport was closed for health and safety, is it your understanding, Pablo, that the contract would then force the land to be given back because it's no longer being used as an airdrome?
Exactly.
That's what I want on the record. Yeah, that's how I understand it too.
It's under the Public Works Act, under Section 252 of the Public Works Act. No longer being used for an airstrip. That has to go back to what it was originally, before it was originally taken.
Cool. That's all we needed to confirm. And I would love for you to stay on the call, even as an observer.
I understand how the system works. I was working with council systems on that board for 20 years. So I understand the process and procedures of it all. And I thank you all for your time and listening. And just remember, we're victims of our history and we're trying to fix it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Pablo.
Well, thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you too. Roger or Rob, would you like to respond to Pablo at this point, or you're welcome to do that now?
Yeah, look, yeah, so Pablo, I don't think we know each other directly. I've probably been in meetings where you've been present, but thank you for your discussion today, or your presentation. I think you're right. We are all at the mercy of history, and we're on a learning journey, and we're trying to work out what does the future look like and how do we sort out some of the problems of the past. So look, I really appreciate your openness and your heartfelt, the way you've told the story of the past. That's very helpful for me. I guess in terms of council, we're open for dialogue all the time. And that's what was part of the conversation you had with Gavin yesterday. Ultimately, earlier in the week, we heard that you were going to speak in this forum, that you were keen to engage with council. So we're keen to engage with you too. terms of how we actually move forward, I've heard a couple of things. One is you've got a board meeting, if I heard correctly, next Tuesday, and you were wanting some kind of definitive answers by then. That sort of time frame is quite difficult in that, for example, this airfield report, we were working on a timeline of getting that finalised by next Wednesday, and the feedback you've given us about the ownership of the land, those are the things we can change in that report. So it is a draft. It's going to get finalised by next Wednesday. It was then on the Thursday going to be presented to the executive team in terms of its recommendations. Now, the board may well have further comment on what's in that report, what it might take to close the airfield down, or what does the different mechanisms that you've referred to, Pablo, how does that all play out if one went down that path, or there was a need to go down that path. So in terms of timeframes, I hear you want this resolved. It's has taken a very long time to get to this point, and it might take a little bit of time and process for us to resolve it. But if you don't hear anything else, we are keen to keep the dialogue open with you, and you've clearly said you want to talk to us. We need to now pick that up and keep that conversation going.
Got it.
Yeah, thank you for that, Roger. Okay, so appreciate that, and I appreciate you being here, Roger, as well, to be able to respond. So what we'll do now is we're going to move on to our reports in our meeting. We will have the second item on our report is our works and issues report. And in there we do have the airfield agenda topic, so that we will be actually having a discussion as a board about that. So if there's anybody who's not on the board who wants to stay on, then just letting you know that will be coming up shortly. You won't have to wait for an hour for us to be talking about that. So the first item under our reports is item 6.1, which is our discretionary fund report on page 34, if you've got your agenda in front of you. I'm going to find it myself here. And Alison, was there anything you needed to comment on this discretionary? I mean, as I see, we now have $20,000, $20,380 in our discretionary fund. So because we have received the recent annual funding of $14,271.
Correct. So through you, Madam Chair, just wanted to draw the attention to last time we met, there was some confusion around the DMO commitments. So we had two grants. One was payable, including GST. Another one was payable, excluding GST, to different entities. So at some point in time, the community board had passed a resolution believing that we had paid less than $1,000 to the DMO. So that's that $130.43 is to take that up, and I'm just needing to get confirmation around whether the board actually wishes to make that payment or whether they do want to rescind it because they understand that it's now to do with GST.
Right. So what would you recommend, Alison?
Well, so if the DMO aren't expecting any further funds from us, then I would remove that and add it back into the pot. I guess there's an opportunity should they need more funding to come and request again anyway.
Yeah, so I suppose originally we wanted them to get $1,000 of funding from the discretionary fund. So have they? So what I understand is they haven't received $1,000 because of the GST content type thing, which I still don't. Sorry.
Yeah. So the resolution you passed said including GST.
Yes. And I think that is probably something that we've learned as a board, and perhaps we needed a bit more support around to get that right. So I would suggest, yes, if they could be paid the $130. Yeah, so that they actually end up getting $1,000, and I apologise for us not knowing more about GST and things. Okay,
so we'll need to work with them because, of course, they'll have to raise another invoice to us to get that payment released. So we will work directly with the DMO. Yeah.
And let's just for a moment, I'll just have a discussion. I'm just saying to Lisa and any other board members, I know Lisa, so maybe that's a conflict of interest, isn't it? Mm-hmm. So actually shouldn't really talk about that. Well, I think that we can have a discussion with the DMO about that, whether they want to do that and make a decision. So I think as a board, we're happy for that $130 to go from the discretionary fund. All board members agree with that. If the DMO decide that it's more hassle than it's worth, then we will not pay them.
Okay.
So is that clear enough, Lynette, in terms of a decision action? Yeah, thanks for that, Alison.
Thanks.
Were there any other questions about the discretionary fund from board members? You just have to let me know. It's a bit tricky just trying to do it. Okay. No, doesn't look like it. Okay, so we're going to move on now to page 36, which is our works, actions and issues report. And we're just going to work our way through the items on this report. So we may as well start with the airfield first. We'll start with the airfield item first because we have people here to discuss that. So just to let you know, in the report, as you know, board members, it says that the draft report has been received from Mike Haynes and that the council are working with the community board. There was an opportunity, I don't know if that's unusual or not, but it felt like from council's point of view, that was the right thing to do, to offer the community and through the community board to give any feedback on the draft, which would then go through to Mike Haynes and he would provide his final report. Rob, would you like to speak? I mean, I suppose just before that, I'd just like to let you know that we did send a little bit of feedback from the board through Rob to Mike on the report. And also letting you know that I was aware that there's some community members through Alan Vink who also provided some community feedback through to Rob at council to go to Mike. So I'm aware also recently this morning, there's been some feedback from the Piako Gliding Club, which has gone through to you, Rob. So that's just, I'm aware that that's kind of the community feedback so far that's gone through to you. And I understand that the next steps would be for the report to be finalised. So Rob, do you want to say anything particularly on where we're at there? Is that accurate?
Certainly, and thank you, and through you, Madam Chair. First of all, I would like to acknowledge Pablo's kōrero, just in terms of framing that up and the importance of the tenure or the future tenure of that land and where that rightfully belongs. With regards to the safety at the airport, that was the principal, or the airfield, that was the principal objective that we wanted to address with this. That was the objective, is really just to be able to provide or to be able to respond to our regulators, CAA, and community concerns with regards to conflict on the airfield, whether that be with pedestrians, animals, aircraft. And so I was asked to come in and support the Community Connections team with this piece of work, with safety as a first priority. We immediately put a number of measures in place that would help control the amount of aircraft visiting the airfield, and that was done via a PPR, or prior permission required, via a NOTAM notification that goes out to every pilot in the country. And we felt that was the very best thing that we could do in the interim to restrict the amount of volume that was coming through, and also to be able to provide additional safety briefing to pilots and for them to acknowledge that formally before they would consider using the facility. Mm-hmm. In conjunction with that piece of work, Mike Haynes' report was being drafted, and that, as some of the community have identified, is that there was areas that where the report stating that council owns the land, that was incorrect. It's managed by council. And so it's good to be able to receive that feedback so that we can amend the final draft that's going to be presented or targeting for Wednesday of next week to present to ELT and any recommendations, or our executive leadership team at council, and any recommendations that may come from that report. So, as Madam Chair has the details she's provided in terms of gathering up that community feedback and anything that's subsequent of today's meeting, will go across to Mike Haynes and help inform that report. I'm very happy to respond to any questions from the board or community members with regard to the operational safety of the airport and the process we're going through.
Yeah, thank you very much, Rob. Appreciate the work that you're doing, and it feels like you're working closely with us and that it's supportive of a good outcome for everyone. So appreciate you being here and doing what you're doing. I don't know if I've got a few things that I would like to comment on in terms of just where we stand today in terms of this piece of work. But before I do that, I was just wondering, are there any of the board members who would like to ask any questions of Rob regarding the draft Mike Haynes report while we're here?
Chris.
Yeah.
Hi, Rob. So one part I find very interesting in the report is on page 10 under the, sorry, I'm just flicking to it to read from it, under 5.2 civil aviation rules, and in the paragraph, I think it's called 139.503, unsafe conditions, it states in the draft report, an aerodrome operator to which this subpart applies must establish procedures to ensure that aircraft movements are restricted or prohibited on parts of the aerodrome where unsafe conditions exist. I find that very interesting in the regards because I understand the council is very keen to have the land ownership issues and the safety issues separated, but it seems that this clause or this part of the report actually links them, because were the council to take the appropriate health and safety action, which is, as stated in the report, restrict or prohibit aircraft movements, then obviously the land ownership would automatically come into play, because as soon as you don't use it as an airfield under your Treaty of Waitangi obligations, you're forced to give it back. So as much as the council would like to separate these two issues as far away as possible, I see that the most health and safety practical outcome fast for everyone would be restrict the aircraft as stated in the report until it is safe. But obviously if you do that, then you give the land back, and for some reason that seems to be where there's this big flow and discussion back and forwards between all the affected parties.
That's a good point, Chris, and thanks for raising that. And as the detail around restrict and prohibit are probably the key pieces of information there. We have restricted or constrained the amount of traffic as an interim measure whilst we finalise what a safe airstrip looks like, or what that may end up with. Certainly to prohibit or even to temporarily close certainly would have bigger implications in terms of agreements that are currently in place with the Crown. And I don't wish to go into that realm, because to be honest, I'm not an SME in that space. And so I'm very happy to support that process. But we were very clear in terms of if we cancel operations, then that has quite a significant trigger under the current understanding that is in place. But what we can do is constrain the amount of traffic that is there through the PPR and the NOTAM, and that allows us, well, we can see straight away that the flight traffic into the airfield has reduced quite some since we've put that in place.
Yeah, what I'm hearing from Pablo is that they're basically giving an opportunity to pull that lever and avoid what could be a rather messy and public kind of process that may not be beneficial for all parties involved. And that technically we could pull the health and safety lever and close the airfield based on health and safety grounds and go down that route. There would be less money spent for the council and less conflict within the community.
Look, I don't want to predetermine the outcome of Mike's report or council's final standing with that. I don't know whether Roger would wish to add anything to this at this point, but that report is still in draft, and the recommendations coming from that draft may change subsequent to input from the community.
Yeah, so thanks for that, Rob. And I would like to have something to say which relates to what you're both talking about. Thank you, Chris, for the questions. Are there any other board members who want to ask questions of Rob regarding the draft report? So yeah, not so much. Yeah. Dennis or Tony or Satnam. Otherwise, I'm happy just to share my thoughts. Lisa, good. So just in light of some conversations and emails that have been happening over the last week, and also just seeing the community feedback and everything really related to this, and a conversation that I had with Roger yesterday, and with you, Rob, just during the week. So what I understand is back in March, the council came to the community board, right? And they suggested two things. They had recommendation of two parts. One is that they proposed health and safety improvements, which is what this Mike Haynes report relates to specifically. The other thing is the council recommended, they put forward to the community board that the infrastructure committee actually do further investigation work so that the council would understand its legal obligation to own and operate the airfield. So it was also noted in the minutes of that March meeting, in our minutes, we have some notes and then we have our resolutions. So that in the notes, it said that there would be consultation with iwi regarding ownership of the airfield. So that point would have come from council staff at our meeting talking about that. That wouldn't have come from the community board, just to be very clear. We might have been talking about it, but that's how it got into our minutes. So that is clear that there was going to be consultation regarding ownership of the airfield. And in that meeting, it was resolved that the community board recognised the proposed health and safety improvements, and we agreed, we put some recommendations to the council around that, right? We know where that went, where it didn't. But we also recommended to the council's infrastructure committee that further investigation be undertaken to understand the council's legal obligation to own and operate the airfield. So we basically said, yes, we agree, council, please go ahead and do that piece of investigative work. So what we know now is through the process that's gone on is that we have this expert, this consultant, Mike Haynes, who is doing this report. I would suggest that as a board, we ask, well, I think first of all, there's two things really. First of all, I would like the community board, if all board members are in agreement, that we state clearly that the community board continue to support the council to further investigate and understand their legal obligation to own and operate the airfield, like they said they were going to do, and that the community board also recommend to council that they work with hapu, all hapu that need to be involved, to resolve any historical grievances or land ownership issues around the airfield, and that we suggest as a board that actually progress is made on this starting now. So that's one thing. Aside from that,
own out of that sentence, why own? Council don't own any of it.
I don't want to go into the detail of that at the moment.
I'm not
So
gonna
if we want
support
to reword it, like if we agree as a board that we would like to make that statement, we can decide on the right wording. That's cool. But just want to say the other point is, and I'll come back to that. So I suppose one thing is I think we as a board need to clearly state what our position is in terms of that longer term piece of work, not just the safety issue. But my point is as well, is that while Mike Haynes is working with the council on this, that we actually ask him to include in his report, whether, because he should know about the stuff, right? Whether it's possible to close, because we've been talking about this, but we want to know in the report, is it possible to close the airfield temporarily? And if so, how long is it possible to do that for? What period of time is it possible to do that for? And what's the process to do that? So I think we should ask Mike to include that information in his report. And also to include in his report that if the council were to permanently close the airfield, what is the process that they would need to go through to do that? Like, we may as well get Mike to work on this, right? He's here at the moment. And the reasons to ask for this to be included in the report is that Mike gives all the options of mitigating safety risks, because that is an option at the moment, is actually to temporarily close the airfield or to permanently close it. And he hasn't outlined that at the moment in his report. And another reason to ask for this in the report is actually just to make the most of this current piece of work with Mike and actually to take a step towards that investigative work. And also to manage the risks in the short term for council, that's an issue, and give the council some time to look into that obligation, their legal obligations around operation of the airfield. So I suppose that long-winded, but I think there's 2 points I'm trying to say. One is, do we agree as a board that we want that extra information included in Mike Haynes' report? And the other one is, do we want to clearly state as a board what our position is around council working with Hapu to do what they need to do? So I hope that was clear. Got any comments from the board members or questions, please?
I mean, through you, Madam Chair, as I said, the very first part of your statement, I don't support because it's incorrect. The council don't own and operate. Council manage and operate an airfield. And then, yeah, that we have to get our sentences right, because this is important. This is on the record, and other interested parties will look up the record and see what we say and what we support. And we have to make sure that that's correct. But I do support that we make sure that there's ongoing work with both Hapu, all interested parties who have any claims to that land, to make sure that they are being heard and that their desires are being followed as soon as possible.
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, I support the points around removing that, the messaging of own. It's the council operate on behalf of the community, but it really is that point that Mike's report is on safety, and you always have, it should include that option of you can do all the stuff to make it a safe operating airstrip, but there is always that option of it not being an airstrip, and therefore you've dealt with all the safety aspects of it. So I certainly support a motion that would be directing Mike's report to include the steps that the council would have to go through to temporarily close the airport or permanently close the airport. Therefore, that way it clearly outlines to the council this is how you would go about it, and then there's no ambiguity of it. We have previously passed a motion saying that the council has to progress forward, I think on the back of the trust's approach, Pablo's approach, and Taraki's report to us, that we need to actually now be asking for, what is your timeline? we actually need from the council actual, a bit of a who's the working party, formalise it up a bit more. Otherwise this could just drag on, forever. So, let's actually say, are you saying that you're going to be working over a year, 2 years, 6 months? We need to know back from the council what is their, at this moment in time, expectation to at least come back to the community, to the, the owners of the land, with their position.
Thanks, Tony. Any comment from you, Satnam or Dennis? No pressure, but just if you would like to, welcome to speak. Just need to unmute Dennis if you're wanting to talk. Is he talking?
He's got audio issues.
Is your mic on?
Well, he's just.
Can I add to the record?
I think
Deborah?
Dennis is going to speak. No,
Record.
just, I think. Are you open to speaking, Dennis? No, he's still got issues. Can't hear you, Dennis, still for some reason.
Your microphone. Maybe write in the chat if you want it on the record.
Yeah, if you would like to, Dennis, just put anything, just type anything into the chat. I know it's not as easy as speaking, but you're welcome to do that.
His volume might be down.
Yeah, or your
Well,
volume
we
might be
thought
down.
can we just add a small point that the airfield was created for the defense of this country and in defense purposes. And when it was turned into a recreational airfield and a golf course, that very much blurred the lines of why it was an airfield in the first place. So the land was acquired during wartime for the defense of New Zealand and this area. And we can definitely say that in the last 50 years, it's not being used for that. So
Look, I think that there's a lot of misinformation going around about this, and I'm finding it very difficult, and I think I should move off here to listen to some of the stuff that's being said today. I'm sorry, Chris, but you're taking up a lot of space and your historical record is inaccurate. And so that's all I'm going to say, but I'm going to, who is the tuku between? Who is the tuku between?
Ivan
The gift of
mentioned
land in 1924. Who is it between, Chris? Just a very small question.
Ngāti Mahanga and the Crown.
That's right. Ngāti Mahanga and the Crown. There's a lot of, I mean, we're happy to come to the table with council at any time to speak. And I'm sorry to take up your space, Gabriel. I know I'm not meant to be speaking. It's just for the board. I apologise for that. But also, equally, it's very difficult to sit here and listen to some of the stuff that's being spoken today. So, hoi anō tēnei. Kei te mihi atu kia koutou, kia koe e Sam. He mihi anō tēnei kia koe e te matua. He mihi aroha hoki tēnei. Mai I tēnei kia Bob McLeod. Tangata kaha ki te kōrero mō ngā iwi me ngā tauiwi hoki I ngā wā katoa. He mihi aroha ki aia me tōna hoarangatira hoki I tēnei wā. So thank you all. Sorry I've interrupted, and thank you, Gabrielle, but I'll get off this at the moment anyway. So I hope to see you all at some stage again. Yeah. And I hope
okay. Thank you.
Volume up, Dennis. Okay. Kia ora, Gabriel.
Yeah, kia ora. Thank you for your words. Appreciate it. And I understand why you needed to do that. Yeah. Kia ora. Okay, so I think I'd just like to acknowledge that from my own point of view, and I could really only speak for me, that I am probably quite ignorant in many things related to this topic, and I very much want to learn and to support the community board to learn about these things and to do, you know, to basically do a good job in our role as board members. So it's not, it maybe feels like a bit of a tricky topic, but I actually feel very, I think it's great that we're having a conversation, even if, you know, we don't know much as we should or need or could know. I think it's good that we're just having the conversation here today and that we're doing what we can. So I think it sounds like, did Dennis put anything in the chat?
Yes, he did.
Let's just have a look what Dennis said, just so that we're hearing you, Dennis. He said, I agree that the council need to continue discussion with the appropriate hapu and need to make sure that Mike's brief includes all options on safety, but is not a report on closing the airport. I hear what you're saying, Dennis. So we don't want it to become a focus on actually this is how we're going to close the airport, but actually that all options are set out in the report. Is that, did I get that right, Dennis? Great. Okay, Satnam, did you want to say anything about this? No, that's okay. All good, Satnam. Okay, so I think what we'll do is we, I mean, I don't know if we need to move a motion or we just basically request that, two things here. So I think that, well, I suppose in terms of the timeline and things like that, if we're actually asking for something from council, then we need to move a motion. So I would like to move that, well, I'd like to, you can help me work this out, Lynette. Did you want to say something? Just on mute.
So are you normally, there are normally actions that go to council out of this. Are you wanting to have extras as far as resolutions, or are you just wanting these as actions that go straight to staff?
So I suppose there's one thing. One thing is we want to make a clear statement as the board about our position, and we want to ask that the council come back to the board with an indication of their position and some timing around this piece of work that it seems like clearly they got their, you know, that they're going to undertake. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is we want to ask that certain information is included in Mike Haynes' report. So from your point of view, Lynette, do we need to move a motion on either of those things, or?
I think you can put them in as an action, because if you put them in as an action, it'll come straight back onto your works and issues report next meeting.
Mm-hmm.
If you're wanting a report back on something, it will come back to your next meeting. The other one is it will go straight to executive leadership team or whoever the person is that's looking after this for them to action the balance. So it's really up to you whether you want a resolution or not, but actions work just in the same way.
Yeah. Any thoughts from board members about that? I'm happy just to do actions. Tony, you got any thoughts about that?
No, I'm fine with that at this point.
Okay, yeah, we can always change that if it's not working, right?
Yep.
Yeah, we can always change it to a motion.
Exactly. Okay, so I think the action is that, well, we would like to just state as a board that we continue to support council to further investigate, to understand council's legal obligations to manage and operate the airfield. Rob, you want to say something? Or are you just waving your hands around? Stretching, that's all good. Okay, so to manage and operate the airfield as recommended in March 2021, and that the community board recommend that council work with hapu to resolve historical grievances and land ownership around the airfield. And we suggest that progress is made on this starting now. And as an action, I suppose, we ask that the council come back to the community board to update us on this piece of work and give an indication of timing. Is that clear enough, Lynette?
Yep, I'll make that workable and I'll check it through with you before we go any further.
Yeah, and the other action is that we're asking as a board that to be included in Mike Haynes' report, that he includes whether it's possible to close the airfield temporarily, and if so, how long is it possible to close it for, and what is the process to do that? And if the council were or needed to permanently close the airfield, what would the process be for them to go through to do that? Happy with that, board? Thumbs up, down? Yep. Dennis, good? Cool. Okay, so thank you for taking the time to work through those things. We're going to move on now. Rob, did you want to say anything else? Or Roger, I'm sorry about that. Rob and Roger patiently sitting there listening. Do you want to say anything else before we move on whilst you're here?
Just from me, look, I think you've covered that all very thoroughly. Thank you for inviting me along to listen and partake in that. Really important messaging for Alison and I to talk to the executive about. If you don't mind, I'll log out now. Nothing else you need me for?
No, we won't. No, not now.
Just, you know where I am if you need any answers on anything.
Yeah, thanks very much, Roger. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yep. Is that good from you too, Rob?
Yeah, look, thank you very much. I would concur with Roger. What I've made some notes throughout the meeting, and then I'm also endeavouring to get a copy of this sent to Mike so he can actually. I think there was some really good conversation that's gone on around this, and I think some of the sentiment needs to be carried through rather than a dot point on a page. And so I think he will get a greater sense of community desires and the board's views by actually watching the meeting. So I'll get that across to him, and we're targeting, just looking at some of the comments here, we're targeting to have this report in a final draft across to the executive at WC for next Thursday, and then subsequent to that, and any recommendations therein. And then so subsequent to that, we'll be coming back to the chair and the community.
Thanks very much, Rob.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Was there any other matters that you would like me to sit in on?
Not that was anything, Lisa, you can think of for Rob?
I think Dennis probably can update us on the surf club.
Yeah, Rob, you're not so much involved in the surf club at the moment, are you now?
Not so much, but if Dennis wanted me to, if you wanted to discuss that next, then I may be able to add something, but I think Dennis is probably across most of it.
Yeah, I think we'll just leave it at that because it's actually not on our works and issues report. And so if it did come, it would actually come under Dennis's member verbal report. So
Okay.
We better not slip that in just like that, I think. But thank you, Rob.
All right, take care.
Yep.
Thank you to everybody.
Okay, thank you too. Okay, how's everyone doing? All good? Okay, thank you. It's kind of different, isn't it, being on Zoom? You kind of just, yeah, I'm not ignoring any of you, even if you're not talking, but okay, so let's work through this now because it's nearly 3 o'clock. Important to have taken that time, but let's just work through these other matters here. Manu Bay breakwater. So I'm just going to go through these. If anybody wants to speak on that, first of all, I'm going to say, do you want to say anything? And then you can put your hand up. Otherwise, I'm going to skip to the next thing. Manu Bay breakwater. Nope. Okay. The only thing I want to say is that the second proposed date falls on the same day as our October Community Board meeting, but it doesn't clash with the times. So just letting you know that. Anybody? The inter Raglan bus service. there's a small update on this, a bit more of an update than what's in our agenda, which is that council staff have been in touch to say that following the government announcement that basically there's no subsidy for new services, so that's kind of disappointing. But that all is not lost, and that Gareth is going to look into alternative funding for the Raglan service, and he'll be working on that and getting back to us shortly. So any questions about that or anything particularly? Otherwise, I'm going to move on. Civil Defence, we've got a meeting coming up in about a week's time to finally, hopefully, yep. Camera Licensing Trust, I can see here, Alison, that I imagine that's a piece of work that you found out, that actually it looks like the Camera Licensing Trust can apply through the discretionary fund.
Yes, so we've had, they've already applied for funds through Huntly Community Board in the prior year, is my understanding.
So thank you for finding that out, Alison. Is that something that we as a board want to do any further action on now that we know that? What would be our next steps? Would it be to...
So we really need to know the locality, sorry through you, Madam Chair. We need to know what is being proposed here so that we can actually be the conduit for that discussion with the Camera Trust.
I think
when you say we, do you mean the council or the community board?
So, well, through your, making resolutions, etc., I can take that to the Camera Trust.
Oh, okay, yeah. Okay, so that you can...
So we probably need to talk to the business chamber and the police about where the best place for cameras would be, wouldn't it? Because we spoke about that at our last chamber meeting, business chamber meeting, about cameras down the end of Bow Street. So it would probably be quite good to have a discussion on that.
Is that something that you are interested or got time to work on, Lisa? Is anybody else on the board who would like to work with Lisa on that? How about you, Satnam?
Yeah, because we were going to do that ages ago.
Yeah, I think Satnam was interested to work with Lisa on that. So that's great to know that that's the way that they could be funded. Thanks, Alison. Soundsplash, that will come to our October meeting. The only thing about that is I just wanted to mention, and you would have probably read this in the report here, is that if there's any feedback that the community board would like to feed through to the events team at council around Soundsplash specifically, just anything that we want to bring to their attention, they're happy to receive that, and that they're in the process of working around consenting and approving the event. So this is a good time for us to do that. So if any board members have anything you want to, we don't have to discuss it now, but if you have anything you want to, just email me and I can send it through to the team. Is that good? Okay. In terms of the Papahua Stage 2, I think you heard me talking with Aaron before, that actually the next move is to meet up with the soccer club, try and work out how we can make it work.
Got a question?
Yes.
Through you, Madam Chair. Did any of the roading or footpath engineers look at what point the footpath crosses the road, and if there was leeway to cross a little bit earlier to avoid some of the football grounds, or is it just trying to manipulate the football fields to fit in the path?
That's something I can find out. I did kind of ask that question, but I wasn't talking to the person, but the main person who's been doing the work. So I think it seems like they're wanting to go down the route of working to keep the footpath on the football side. But I mean, I can ask that question, Chris, when I meet up with them again. Yeah. But I think it seems there's they may have done some work into looking at that, and actually it's perhaps a bit more complex. So I think they're kind of going down, can we do it down this route? I suppose, yeah. I'm happy just to ask that question again.
Yeah, I think what we raised in the last meeting was maybe having the footpath split between the two sides rather than it all on one side or all on the other, because we recognise there's issues, historical and practical, on that side for a fair ways, but at some point there might be a safe place to cross the road because most people are going, and then it avoids a lot of the people having to cross the car park diagonally and all the cars and whatnot.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Chris. Alison, did you want to talk about that, or were you just speaking to someone else?
I was just confirming that that had been raised with the project team after your last meeting, and that was part of the information that they were to work through. So I would expect that when you do meet with them next week, they should be able to give you a position on that.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, thanks for that. No, I remember that too. Harbour Board leases, that's going to be talked about under public excluded. And in terms of the year-to-date service requests, so this was really, as a board, we were saying that we used to get more information about overflows. So what I can see the council's responses is that actually this information doesn't get included in this report. And then they provided some information to us as a board about some recent spills and overflows. So it's where do we want to go from here? Are we, because, you know, if we just leave it like that, it means that we'll have to ask again because it's not set in any particular reporting. So do you have any thoughts about that, Tony, in terms of like whether we want to try and request a regular update on overflows, or like how do we,
Yeah, it's not about making work, you know, so if there's existing, because really it's just trying to make sure that we're not slipping backwards again, and focus is being lost on the health of our storm wastewater system in Raglan. You know, we've gotten it into a good position by lots of focus, and a lot of that focus came from, you know, the community board and the community not being happy with overflows that then went into the harbour. So I think through the infrastructure committee and that, Gabrielle, you know, if you can figure out, you know, is there just a piece that we're taking out of the infrastructure? And it's like wherever it's reported. Alison, you got to.
Yes, sorry, through you, Madam Chair. So we put a lot of investment into making sure that these wastewater overspills over time would come down, and I believe that's been achieved. So are you saying that you would like to have reporting to say that there has been no overspills, not just getting reporting when there have been overspills? No,
it's if there has been an overspill, you know, is it like in this one we're talking about a washing hose, washing machine hose has, and so therefore that opened the dialogue of, okay, is there something is to the community board? You know, we did the 3 Ps, Lisa and myself. You know, is it something that we could go back out to the community again and you know, highlight, or is it because we're having, you know, more deterioration happening in the system? You know, that's the kind of, you know, how can we be aware of them so people aren't surprised that, oh, there was an overflow over there, so they can at least see it in our minutes and understand what's happening, and how can we help to, you know, educate and
Great.
if it is being
so awareness
by what our residents.
Yeah, okay, we'll note that.
So yeah, I don't know how much work it is. I mean, we obviously get that year-to-date service request. I think is it every quarter we get that? Maybe every quarter, Alison? So, I mean, is it possible if it states that there are overflows, if the team knows that there is anything kind of not reasonably significant, but that actually they would just put some notes in like they have done? I mean, is that much work for them to do that? Also, Lisa, did you want to say something? I suppose it remains something which is quite important to us, so we don't want it to sort of let it slip. We want to keep really close tab on it.
And I can see, so they did notify it at the time to the community board, or that's what the report says, that you were aware of it at the time. What you're asking is like a bit more detail around that if it does happen, to see whether there's anything that you can do to assist in making sure it doesn't happen again. Is that right? So this says that you were notified in July.
Yeah, I think there was one that was notified, maybe then there was one that wasn't. Did you want to say something, Lisa?
No, it's okay.
Okay.
I think it was on the same day, so potentially it didn't get outlined as more than one.
Okay. Well, I think that's, I don't know whether, what would you feed back to your team, Alison, around this? Would there be anything that you'd feed back and then that we can just sort of leave it and keep an eye on it? Like, is there anything?
Yeah, so I will just ask Carol, who manages the water care contract at council, I'll ask what level of reporting they're getting on these incidents, and I'll request that as they happen for the community boards to actually be informed, and that should be at the time rather than waiting for the next meeting, so that they can actually discuss that with their communities if any questions are raised. And I'll just say, and if there's anything in there that they think that it could have been prevented, and actually to outline, is there some actions that the local community board could undertake? Yeah,
that's helpful. I think that's good. Yep, I'm happy with that. Are you happy with that? Yes, Lisa?
Well, sometimes you might see that I put pictures up of undies and stuff like that. Roger does send me intimate photos of things he finds, so I try and put that up as a reminder, to, for the 3P. So yeah, so that's quite a good.
You're the undie lady, aren't you? No, don't worry.
Yeah,
no, don't worry, you're not. Okay, yeah, I think that's good. So both of those things, I think, just like you say, keeping the awareness in the community of what's happening, and that we've got it at different levels at our community board level, more formally, but sharing it out on Facebook as well.
Yeah, and like Tony said, then we can respond with the messages that we need to get, like this has happened, this is what we need to do. So we're on top of it as a board.
Yeah. We don't want to get to the end of our term and just be like it's all kind of slid and we've just done all this work and then, this is good. Okay, page 43, Gilmore Street upgrade, looking great, getting really close, isn't it? We've already covered Manu Bay, Papahua. So that's the end of works and issues report. And we're now going to go to page 82. Which was really just to include the final reserves management plan for the board to have to hand. You've probably noticed some of the decisions that were made around that. I don't know if there's any particular comments or questions from the board. Otherwise, I expect in our role, having oversight of the coastal reserves, that we would all read it. Don't test me on it yet, but that we would all read it and really have a good understanding of it, and we will discuss it together as a board. I've got some comment to make on that in my chair report, but are there any questions around that from anyone at this stage? No.
I actually think they did a really good job.
Yeah, it's pretty thorough, wasn't it, really? They had a lot of things to work through with the community and quite big changes. So, yeah. I think it's great to have it. Great to have an up-to-date plan, even if it's not perfect. And we've got some strategic planning and things we want to do as a board with the council. It's great to have. It's great to have it to that point, isn't it?
Yeah.
So thank you for including that. Chairperson's report. I will take that as read, and yeah, the only question I had, which was kind of could have come under, I suppose, are there any questions about my chair report? You can see there's the events timetable there, which we're going to have regularly. And the only question I had to the board is, do we want our next meeting in October to be in the evening that like we discussed? Are we all still up for that? Yep. Dennis, Chris, Tony, you good for that too? Evening meeting?
Yep. Should be fine.
Cool. So what we'll need to do is we'll just need to work with the democracy team to get that information out probably quite soon, because will you be sort of advertising that soon, Lynette, into the community, the next meeting?
What time are you looking at having it?
We did agree on a time. What was that time? It was not too late, because if we decided if it went on. 5:30?
5:30. Gaileen's got her hand up.
Sorry. Oh, yes, right, the yellow. Yep.
Through you, Madam Chair, you actually need to put a motion for that, because all your meeting dates and times are actually resolved at the beginning or around about October, November of the previous year.
Mhm.
So you actually just need to put a motion to amend next month's meeting date. Well, not date, but time.
Make sure it doesn't clash with
Democracy, what? Just EL meetings?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're talking about a next board meeting?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to put a motion that the next community board meeting, that we amend our community board times or schedule, and that the next community board meeting, which is in October, pretty sure it's the 27th, would be an evening meeting starting at 5:30 p.m. So who would like to second that? Chris, everyone in favour?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, page 89, councillor's report. Thank you, councillor, for your report. Is there anything particular you would like to speak about in your report? Any highlights or anything to emphasise to the board?
The representation review, which we have obviously had our deliberations, that's been really interesting, and our proposed extension of the community board area hasn't been supported in full, but parts of it have, for Okiti and Timata, but not as far as Waitatuna, because the mesh blocks was actually quite tricky when we were online yesterday, and you can go and watch the you can go onto the YouTube channel for the council one and see those discussions, because it was actually hard to go through when you're on Zoom because you can't see the mesh block maps. So Anton put them up, and at first it wasn't supported the extension to where we'd requested, but small portions, so Okiti, Timata, but then the next mesh block, which was where we wanted to include Waimaori Road, right down to Aotea, was too far. It was too big a mesh block to add on to that. And so I've just asked Axel if I can get a map of that, those mesh blocks, because it was quite hard to see online. But it's been a really interesting process, yeah, from all over the communities. And I don't know if Gayleen would like to add anything, because her and Matt have been sitting right through them and taking all of the notes. And the proposal for the Whaingaroa ward to go as far as Chiako won't include Chiako, so it's changed that, and a couple of the other, and a number of the other ward areas as well. Gayleen, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I think Councillor Thompson's covered most of it. I can actually try and get Matt to share my screen for me so that I can actually show you the map that councillors will consider tomorrow.
Thank you, Gayleen.
And I'll just get Matt to, it's there somewhere. It's in my emails.
I have to say, Gayleen and Matt and all of the staff in this process have had to work really hard to get it all.
Yeah, it's been a lot of work.
Can we just open the map without?
So rather than, because that one went down there.
Oh, I see.
So unshare my screen and then just have a look in there. We won't be a moment, but
Right,
I think some of the key things, Gabrielle, there was a discussion today with the community board chairs and ELT and councillors about splitting Raglan into an urban subdivision and a rural subdivision. So we're just doing numbers on what that means.
On the board area you're talking about,
Yes.
isn't it, Gayleen? Just the board area? Yeah.
Correct. Yep. So Matt's got it now of...
And I think what I understood from what the mayor was saying is I thought that was actually a good point. Should I just finish saying that first, Gayleen?
Yeah.
Is that if the board changes, as you're seeing, and Gayleen will talk about here, is to make sure that it's fair representation for rural voice and people on the board, is actually that there might be almost like a split within the community board. So I don't know how that would work, Gayleen, whether you would say 2 seats have to go to rural, 4 to, I'm not sure what your process is around that, but I mean, I personally felt that that sounded like quite a fair way to yeah, it'd be interesting, but I didn't really personally have a problem with that. Like,
So what happens when we do subdivisions on community boards? And the message was very clear from across the district that people wanted a rural voice to be heard and to have their own rural voices. And so that's why the establishment of the Rural Import District, Rural Investment, no, it's something anyway. It's a rural board in the old Onewhiro portion of the Onewhiro Turco board. So they've established a new community board in that area, which will be split into 4 subdivisions as well, to ensure that not one area like Port Waikato or Onewhiro could dominate the board. Again, you know, it just caused the same issues that Tuakau expressed. So that has a new board in that area, and with this, what it works on, the plus or minus 10%, Gabrielle, it, so on your population stats, which Anton's furiously working on at the moment, is finding out how many seats would be urban and how many seats would be rural. And just off the top of his head, he said 5 seats would probably stay urban and there'd be 1 rural. But until he does the full statistics on those rural areas, and you still have the contiguity issues, it's still got to be the subdivisions have to be contiguous. So that might be a problem in itself.
And then Gayleen, in the discussions, because I couldn't attend this morning because I was hoping in the iHub, when we looked at then when Anton was putting on the map when we were working on it, the next mesh block, in that area there then became enormous, didn't it? It was
to the south.
Yeah, to the south. So so that was just an enormous area to add to the community board. And so too with the one going to the east and then from Tiuku onwards. So that was so when he was putting up the mesh blocks, therein lies the problem.
So does that not include Tiuku now, like with the new area? It doesn't quite include Tiuku? I don't, you probably don't know that, Gayleen, because it's a lot of detail. I don't feel like it does.
It's Chipley Road and Warren Road, I think. But you see, then it goes Tiuku, then it goes right out. That mesh block is really big.
Well, maybe it does, because it probably follows the main road and you can see where it looks.
Through you, Madam Chair.
Yep. Chris, sorry, I just can't. How do we see everyone?
Can't,
it's just harder to see everyone now that. Could I ask you? Yeah, go, Chris.
Just to Gayleen, like, what was like wrong with our our secondary proposal to just expand our board by 1 mesh block all around, because that brought in the rest of Ruapuke, it brought in all of Tumata, all of Tiuku, all of Okere, and it didn't take in very little of Waitatuna, and that would give rural people quite a decent voice without too much hassle.
It's actually, I think it's not, those 2 that are there, they are 2 mesh blocks. So it's not as simple as going, it's 1 mesh block, because it's actually.
No, it's 6. We propose 6 mesh blocks that encircle our current 5 or 6, I have to look on the map, but there was 5 or 6 mesh blocks that currently kind of encircle our current community board area. So it would be literally an expansion by 1 deep is what we suggested in our secondary.
It doesn't work like that though. It's not, because the next mesh block goes from Ruapuke Road right down to Aotea.
Aotea Harbour.
So it's actually, so even though we might think, oh yeah, we can do this ring around, which is what I thought, you could do the ring around the mountain, but it's not like that. When it's like eating a cake. So 1 mesh block gets chunked, and then when we added 1 past Okiti, then goes into Waingaro, and then when we go like Tiuku, it goes to not quite to Waitatuna, but to the road. So the mesh blocks aren't these small things in that rural sector. They become actually quite big.
I understand it completely, and we looked extensively at the maps, and the 2 landowners on that mesh block that you're talking about on the coast, is the Thompsons and the Peacocks. There's literally only 2 landowners, both of which both families contribute to
That's not
Raglan.
true. That's not true, because we've got land there. My brother-in-law's got land there. That's incorrect.
I wonder whether maybe, I mean, this is just a thought, Chris, I'm hoping it's not, but I wonder whether the maps with the mesh blocks that you looked at, I'm not trying to say this is kind of like an excuse, but I'm just wondering because whether they were maybe different, like.
I just pulled them up off the Survey New Zealand from the last survey of New Zealand. That was where they create the mesh blocks from.
I think
we can take this discussion offline in the future, because I thought what we proposed was quite practical. And if you do a rural urban subdivision, where are you proposing the rural urban subdivision to be? Because currently a lot land area, most of the land area of the community board in its current form is rural. The land area is very small, that is urban.
Yeah, have you got any thoughts about that, Galen? Like, has that been looked at? I mean, it's all very
Well, that's
new,
what we
isn't
said. It's because it was only raised this morning.
Yeah.
At that Zoom meeting with elected members, we haven't had a chance to. So Anton's working on that now, and we're reconvening the deliberations because we kind of missed a little step out on Tuesday to have the community board numbers had to be confirmed for each of the community boards and these subdivision issues because they weren't in the initial proposal. So we have to, you know, have a resolution around that, the numbers on community boards. So just so you're aware, there is a proposal for Taupiri to drop to 4 community board members. The new rural community board will only have 4 members plus appointed councillors. But none of the other community boards will change in their membership number because of their population stats versus anyone else. You know, yours would be the lowest out of the boards that have 6 members.
You mean
the
population? The population, yeah.
Galen, can I just ask in terms of the process? So is what was talked about with councillors recently, and you know, it looks like the Raglan Community Board has extended slightly. Is that now kind of the decision, and now it's just really working out the details? So is there, you know, just from, because I know I was going to think from our point of view as a community board, is there any more room to kind of like question or ask or push for more, or is it basically that's it?
The only thing you could do is, you know, feed that back through your councillor. But I think Councillor Thompson did a great job in conveying what she could to the council. And because the mayor did take the lead from the local councillor in each of the community board areas. But when Councillor Thompson saw those couple of mesh blocks that were requested, and even she had to concede that it took in too much of a rural aspect of with minimal residents actually in those areas, so that the councillors couldn't see the point of that.
So thanks for that, Galen. That's really clear. So I think Chris or anyone else on the board, if there's anything else we want to have a chat to Lisa about, let's do it offline after the meeting, and then that's our opportunity. But we need to do that quite soon.
We have the same maps then that Galen that you're working off, because I just used the link that you provided in the workshop.
No, you won't have the same maps because they're still not finalised. They will be finalised with the agenda that goes out for the 28th of September.
You mean the mesh block maps, Chris?
I mean the mesh block maps, because...
So Intramaps is still open. The links for Intramaps is still open, so you can still use Intramaps. But what that map I showed you, which had a couple of additional mesh blocks in it, and I thought it actually included Tamata and Tuku, so I'd have to go back through the notes. That's what I'm just trying to finalise at the moment.
I'm pretty sure it
includes Tamata.
It does include Tamata, but I don't know if it includes Tuku. That's the only thing. Because unfortunately, when I looked at that mesh block for Tuku, I'm pretty sure that's the one that goes right up to
Waitatuna.
The beginning of Waitatuna.
Yep, and
So,
I
yeah,
think I think there was a lot of discussion around that, and that it would impede on Waitatuna, and you had already received some feedback that Waitatuna didn't have an interest in coming into the community board
We addressed that in our submission.
we can have a look at that, Chris. Let's do that offline, okay? We can have a chat about that, and I think that's the place to do it.
Yep.
Because it seems like there's still an opportunity just to have a closer look at it. Yeah, are you able to share even that map that you shared with us, Gayleen? I mean, we wouldn't share it any further. It's just a bit tricky if we can't.
So I can't share it until after tomorrow.
So we know which ones they are. I remember which ones.
Yeah,
That one.
I can't share that until after tomorrow when it has
No
been
worries.
ratified by the councillors.
I think I took a screenshot today. Yeah.
I don't want to hear that, Gabriel.
No, I mean, not then.
Yeah.
Not even in this meeting. Don't worry, you weren't even aware. You weren't. All good.
Fine.
Offline. So thank you, Gayleen, for explaining that. It's really helpful, and really appreciate all the work that you and the team have been doing. It's huge, right?
It has been a big job.
Anything else, Lisa, on your councillor report? Is that good? Okay, so on board members' reports, we have the report, thank you, through you, Dennis, for Places for People, which is the same update we put into the Chronicle.
Yep.
Anything else you want to say on that project, Dennis, while we're here?
No, I think on Places for People, there's been a couple of comments of people still complaining about the parklets. Just pass on to people that there's another valuation exercise going, and when feedback will be gathered at the end of December or during December. So we should get feedback from people at that stage, and we can reassess it then.
Thank you for that. Yeah. One thing I did, is Lynette, yeah, Lynette, you're there. One thing I did miss, Lynette, which is not great, but was that I meant to bring up something to add into the works and issues report. So is that okay if we go back to do that now? I just had my note there. What it is, and I'm just aware of the time as well, and I'm aware that we've got a public excluded report as well, which will happen straight away, but hopefully this won't take too much time.
I've got a keyboard.
And so do I. So yeah, we'll be wrapping this up, I would say, in the next 10-15 minutes, just to let you all know. But I just wanted to add into the works and issues report the walkway from the jetty, the Bow Street jetty, to the Coast Guard building. So I've been made aware from council staff. No, you know this one, Dennis. I've been made aware. I know it's all right. We've got to do it. We can't freak out. Anyway, I've been made aware from council staff that a member of the community has raised a strong concern around the safety of that walkway. That it doesn't. I think you all know where we mean, right? It's the piece of walkway that runs along from the jetty to the Coast Guard building, where the footbridge runs through the, you know, at the middle of that. And they've said to council that they think it's a high safety risk in terms of, I don't know the too much detail, but I think probably for smaller children, you know, there's no rail there, and there's a drop down into the deep water at high tide. So I had a chat with Megan today, and we decided that what we would do is bring it to the board first for us just to have a little discussion about it, and to think about how we might as a community and a board respond to this. So yes, Lisa.
So when you say, Gabrielle, to the jetty, you don't mean
No,
right to the jetty?
I don't actually. I mean,
yeah,
I mean
the
just past the
footpath.
water.
Yeah, to opposite maybe where the
Under the Norfolk Pines.
yeah, so just along the skinny part. That's not going to be fencing off.
No, yeah, it's actually that very short section either side of the, when you come out of the footbridge, and you've got town in front of you, it's just those little bits of footpath either side. So the question is, council will need to respond in some way. Yeah, and I suppose potentially a report could have come to us from council, kind of stating the facts and then talking about the potential risks and everything. But I think we have the opportunity just to talk about it together now, and just talk about whether we think it is a risk. Have you been aware of this in the community before, people alerting you to this fact? Are we aware of this as a board, that it's something that community is worried about? And if so, what would we think would be the best way to check in with the community and decide whether in fact something does need to be done or not? So my question is very clearly, are you aware of this as a potential safety risk from what you've heard in the community?
Well, a couple of people, Gabriel, have raised it with me in the past, both elderly and young people, and that sort of thing. We walk on it all the time. I guess it comes back to just how crowded it is and how conscious of it you are. It's more the young, very young people that seem to be the ones that people have been concerned about, that are riding, like 3 and 4 year olds that are riding push bike. They're concerned they're right off the edge. But you just ask the question about the logic of someone that young riding a push bike along there. I know historically guys have ridden off it, but they haven't come to much harm. I guess the question, if we did put a handrail on it, then I think you'd be forced to make it actually wider, because you put a handrail on it, it's going to take another 500 mils off. And between the bridge and the jetty, it's pretty narrow in a couple of places, because the new ramp off the bridge is probably pinched 400 mils, and then a handrail is going to pinch another 400 mils. So if you put just a handrail there, I think it would be quite constricted as far as pedestrian movement as a two-way passageway in some places, not all of it, but in some places. So it might be quite a more significant job than just putting a handrail.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks, Dennis. How about you, Tony or Chris? Are you aware of that being a sort of potential? Has anyone alerted you to the fact that it's a bit of a potential safety risk or concern?
Not to me.
No.
Yeah. How about you, Satnam? I'm assuming that one's in. Yeah. Good. No. Oh, yeah. Here we go. Are you there, Satnam? I can see that you've unmuted. No, it's gone back on. Oh, off. Okay. Lisa, anything from you?
Well, I know of it because the guy contacted me.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay, that guy.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So he contacted me, and I do know that there had been people in the past that littlies have gone off over the side, but he's that first person that's contacted me directly about safety issues. But other than that, most people are quite accepting of it.
Yeah. I mean, from my own experience with littlies, I have been quite nervous about that, because I've got a little boy, and kind of, if there's people walking and then he's on his little bike, I mean, he doesn't swim, if he doesn't swim yet, then I've just been quite cautious about it myself. So I'm kind of aware of that. I'm not cautious myself as an adult, and I have, I suppose, just heard nothing too big really, but just other conversations with other probably parents about, oh yeah, that can be a bit dodgy or something. So it sounds like, from what we're hearing or what we've heard, it's not a biggie. So I suppose the question is what do we need to do from here? I don't actually really know. But I mean, we can just feedback this to Megan. We can just let her know that we had a talk about it, and that, like you've raised, Dennis, if the community decided that actually we wanted some sort of safety handrail or something, bollard or something to support little ones, yeah, that could encroach on the width of the space and yeah. So what do we want to do? Do we just ignore it, or no?
I think we give that feedback.
Yeah.
And actually then, I mean, we can't do anything if we haven't got an idea of the design, or if it would encroach on the space, as Dennis had suggested, and because it's those checks and balances, the safety with the practicality, and then it'll come down to the cost and what are all of the options. And what I'm hearing is that hardly any of us have experienced
like we mismanage it. It seems like the community kind of manages it, you know, that we're aware of it and therefore we just do things to say hop off your bike or just wait, or, you know, it seems like that's what's happening. I haven't noticed things on Facebook or people kind of, you know, so yeah, I think we could just feed that back through to Megan. And my feeling though is if from Megan, she felt that we needed to look into it. We would need to check in with the community about it. You know, we would need to check in. Yeah.
Did Guinness manage to talk to the medical centre about if they've had lots of,
Oh, that's right.
you know, if they've had a number of incidences arise because of this? Remember when we talked in council, should I follow up with that?
Did you hear that, Dennis?
Yeah, well, you're talking to me. Yeah, you can do. Just ask Michelle if she's had what, you know, if she can do some stats or if they've had aware of anything significant.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a little bit, it's just an interesting one because, you know, at the moment we've obviously got the kind of risk things around the airfield and the risk around the wharf. And so we've got to just kind of be aware that to then present to the community another kind of risk thing that we need to assess is.
If you look at the one from the wharf, from the jetty going towards the wharf, the wooden one, in places that's 2 meters up there and the kids can fall off the rocks, but you know, there's no handrail on that one and that's a new one. So
yeah, it does feel a bit different there. It's not so much of a channel, like the water is more shallow and there's kind of a lot of rocks going down there. So I've never felt concerned along there at all. Does feel quite different. I think because you've got a lot of people walking often, you know that, Aidan, it's like on that one that we're talking about, there's often, it can be quite busy there.
Oh, yeah, it gets quite crowded, and especially if you've got someone with a dog and everyone's trying to get around that, and then kids on push bikes, you know. But
there's a bit of a blind corner.
At the end of the day, parents need to take some responsibility for their little kids.
Yeah. Okay, well, thanks for your thoughts so far. We don't have to totally resolve it at the moment. I don't feel like I've kind of got a bright kind of solution or even next step, but I think just good to hear your thoughts as a board and, you know, be in touch or feed in if you have anything else. Otherwise, it'll probably come back to us in some other manner. Yeah, you can always chat to friends just informally if you want to, if you feel to, and just, you know, gauge it a bit further. Sorry, it feels a bit lame, but yeah. So I think we're going to move on to, so we don't actually have really any particular actions, Lynette. I think we've said that we wanted to add it to works and issues, but I think that our action will be to feedback to staff, just the thoughts of the board, just to be clear. Yeah. We're going to move on to the public excluded now. So that will mean that, who do we have on here? That Mr. Lawson and Mr. Moore will need to be, will need to leave the meeting, please. So we'll just give you a couple of minutes to do that, and then we will go on to the next part of our meeting.